Hello and welcome to Talking Development. This month we're celebrating women. Women who are breaking barriers and challenging the status quo, whether at home or at work, including in industries they've been excluded from for far too long. Today I'm in Delhi, India, and I've got the perfect guest to illustrate that, Nupur Garg, the founder of Wimpy. Wimpy is a non-profit platform working to bring more women into the private equity and venture capital world. And let me tell you, Nupur's work is making a difference here in India and beyond. Nupur, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
So I want to hear private equity and venture capital. How did you end up in that world? I got a hint that it might actually be a bit close to home for me.
That's absolutely right. I actually started my stint in private equity and venture capital at IFC, which is part of the World Bank Group.
Of course, wonderful.
I joined IFC straight out of business school, and I have stayed in this industry since then.
That's wonderful. You then, at some point, decided that you should create this platform. Mm-hmm. And I'm always curious what makes people, like when was the moment when you felt there was this gap somewhere and you were compelled that you wanted to create this platform? What led to it?
On a vacation, and I just woke up in the morning and just looked at my husband and said, I want to do something about bringing more women into private equity. And he looked back and said, yeah, why not? If not you, then who else? When I had to hire somebody, I advertised 3 times. I was told I might lose the headcount, but I just didn't see any women come up in the top 3 or even in the top 5. And I still remember this, there were 11 applicants out of 753 that were women. Wow. So just statistically speaking, the probability of any of those 11 making it to the top 3 close to 0. Yeah. And that's when I started to realize that there's probably more to this thing than saying let the best candidate win. That needs to be worked on.
What you experienced back then was that either there was lack of awareness of the opportunity in this particular role you were hiring for, or there's actually a pipeline problem, that there's just not enough people coming into this industry. Tell me a little bit about how is the private equity industry in India today, and are there a lot of women in this industry today?
We don't really have market-specific data. We are actually working on a report right now, which we expect to release in the next couple of months, to have India-specific data. But based on something we had done in 2022, we have about 25% women in the workforce, about 49-50% at the entry level, which is fantastic. Yeah. About 14% at mid-level, so you can sort of see the pyramid build, and the same 6-7% at senior levels. And the senior levels also includes women who are not in core investing roles, so they're not really influencing decision making. The other thing is the anecdotal evidence, and I say that when I got into this industry in 2011, and I spent my first week on a BD trip, sort of just mapping out every fund manager in the country, I didn't see many women get added to that list between 2011 and today. I mean, I can just count the 4 fund managers that have spun out of their existing firms and launched their own funds. So, we can still count the total number on our fingertips. So the situation, I think, is quite similar to what we see in other markets. But in terms of what's going today, we've actually had people say, we look at private equity as before Wimpy and after Wimpy.
Oh, interesting.
Very
so
interesting.
It's really having an impact.
That's
wonderful.
It's wonderful for us when people say that. The consciousness and I say the decibel levels of the conversation have really increased. So today, everybody in the industry knows about Wimpy. Every woman knows about Wimpy, and every fund manager knows about Wimpy. So we've got all of those people to work with us, and I think that's starting to now reflect in how people are very, very actively reaching out and saying, can you help us find more women to put on boards of our portfolio companies? Can you help us hire senior women? Can you help us find junior women? We run a 1:1 mentorship program, so can we send women to your program? So I think it's a journey, but we seem to be doing so well.
Oh, that's so great. Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
That's wonderful. You mentioned a word that I know means a lot to you and also to me, which is mentoring. given also now the success that this platform is having. And likewise, now that younger women or women that are coming up in their career come to you for wisdom and advice as a mentor, are there any particular pieces of advice you would share, and 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give to your young self or a young person today? But I'm also curious, was there any particular advice that was given to you that you took away with you and that you feel looking back that actually helped me a lot?
There is one piece of advice that I think literally changed how my career played out. So this was when I was a young mother, and at 4 months I was back at work running 2 deals, and I reached out to this friend who was a national leader at a Big 4 firm. I said, you know what, I can't do this. Can you just give me a part-time partner level position? You know me, I know private equity. We'll make this work, I'm gonna do well. And he looked at me and he said, you know what, Nupur, you're trying to take a long-term decision to solve for a short-term problem. Your child's gonna grow up, but unfortunately the stigma that is going to get attached to you as a person who lacks ambition and as a person who does not really care for growing, etc., is not something that even I would be able to help you with when it comes to my own organization. And that really got me thinking, and I went back to my husband. He said, you know, you're trying to be a superwoman. Yeah. You've got a husband, you've got in-laws, you've got a mother, right? Let's build an infrastructure. If you're feeling overwhelmed, there's always a solution. So this first bit about taking a long-term decision to solve a short-term problem, I think that is one advice I give out most frequently. Yeah. Another bit is for younger women still is your choice of life partner is make or break when it comes to your professional journey, right? So just be honest upfront and establish the equation. What are your aspirations? And you know, go forward with mutual respect. On the professional side, this is specifically for entrepreneurs. Just because we are in an industry where women entrepreneurs hear a lot more no's, and there is a lot of conversation around the biases that exist, I think the no's get amplified in their minds. So I always say that there's not a single entrepreneur, regardless of who he or she is, who's not heard a no from an investor. And it is impossible to assume that all investors will think the same way. Otherwise, everybody would have similar portfolios. So you just need to take it as a matter of fact. It's something that has happened, learn from it. But don't let that emotion overcome. You know, people say resilience, and I think resilience does not even begin to describe what sometimes women have to, you know, go through. But just pull yourself out of that, leave the emotion aside, bring the passion forward, and continue with that.
I think that's really interesting. This last reflection of being able to treat the no, let it go to a certain level of depth, and then let it go.
Let it go.
That's really powerful. I'm gonna, even though I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm gonna incorporate that myself. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, it's been a pleasure for me really hearing from Nupur and learning about the amazing work that she's doing to create a more inclusive investment ecosystem. What I'm taking away is that you're not only ensuring women have a seat at the table, but also showing that a career in private equity and venture capital is actually one that's pursuing. And as always, here's my take. Women need more than just capital to thrive. They need access to networks, markets, and entrepreneurial ecosystems. Yet, in emerging markets where talent abounds, only 7% of private equity and venture capital goes to women-led businesses. This is a striking paradox, especially considering the strong evidence that investing in women entrepreneurs is smart economics. This is why we all need to step up. By 2030, the World Bank Group aims to provide 80 million more women and women-led businesses with capital, addressing a critical constraint to entrepreneurship growth. This will be critical, not only in India, but across the globe, because connecting women to finance is a great return on investment. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on Talking Development.